All right, so we're back in Ohio after a sick week last week. Obviously, you guys probably seen this out there, and we know that we finished. We kind of want to take a second and go over any kind of carnage we had or damage to the car. Also, things that we want to change for the next, upcoming drag and drive, and also for the year of small tire racing and any other kind of racing that I want to do with it. So we'll kind of go over a couple of things. The first thing is some of the body damage that the car acquired, mainly because of the front end being so long, going up and down some of the curbs, maybe not having the front end as high as it could have been, plus all the extra weight we had in the car and on the car. We kind of scraped up the bottom of it, nothing too bad, a couple chips and scrapes. The driver's side door acquired some damage the first day when one of my crew partners, not going to mention any names, Tom, but he kind of took a scooter ride up the side of the car, up the door. Luckily, that's one of the changes we're going to make. Talk about that in a minute. We're going to change the hood for a couple reasons. One, that didn't actually fit very well. We put it on a couple minutes before we loaded it in the trailer. It wasn't really made for this car. We just kind of made it work. So the hood sustained quite a bit of damage, not from anything other than just chips and putting it on and off a million times. Setting it down kind of acquired some damage there. The Pro Charger, we're actually going to send out and have rebuilt. It still spins, it still works. You see my last pass was a 746 at like 185 miles an hour. Obviously, it's still good. We're just not used to driving that far on a Pro Charger. So we're going to send that out to them. We already talked to them, kind of line that up. We'll get that out to them and have them service it, see if there was any damage to it, but nothing else. Have a good bill of health to begin the year, the actual year up here in the north anyways. The alternator situation, day one, we ended up JB welding the alternator pulley on and the nut after losing it in the burnout box. So we're going to send that back out to the alternator, to Singer Alternators, and let him go over it. I think we might need a longer shaft or to modify the pulley to work with that combination with the Pro Charger setup. So we're going to do that. We have a decent oil leak, nothing too crazy, but we're going to go through the motor anyway, so we're going to address that as well. One of the biggest things that everybody knows about at this point is the PMU from ECU Masters. We do have another one in the car, and it is fully functioning. They actually reached out to me during the event. I just didn't see it in my notifications and my messenger, so they're aware of the situation. They already have another one waiting for me. They're going to send it back to their engineers and figure out exactly what happened to it so that it doesn't happen again to anybody. Not something that's common with them. I've seen it all over the place as far as never happening. So not just via them, but all their distributors and other people that use the product. So very hopeful that that will not happen again. But yeah, we'll kind of go over and show you everything, every little piece that might have been damaged. I guess we'll start with the steering linkage. So we have 3 of these mil-spec steering joints. All of them have a substantial amount of play in them now. They are not made for street use, let alone the weight that I was turning, especially with the street tires and wheels on it. I had to go to like a 205, I think it was, front tire. So a lot harder to turn, and then having that much extra weight on it made it way too much stress on this steering situation. Also, in the bottom of the steering column, there is a black bushing, kind of like a urethane bushing. It is barely even in there anymore. So it just from turning and putting that much force on it, it walked itself around. So that needs to be replaced and addressed. I'll probably try to replace it with something stronger, maybe a different Delrin or something like that, that will be stronger, self-lubricating. So that is a big thing that needs to be addressed and changed. As far as the oil leak, you can kind of see it was leaking from this corner of the pan and just kind of moved itself down the car. For the street drive, we took the diaper off, and mainly just for oil temps to try to keep everything cooler, and that allowed it to soak the bottom of the car. As far as other leaks, I mean, the transmission looked good. It doesn't look like that even seeped. That just looks mainly like oil issue. The rear end leaked, but in a mad rush, we forgot to actually put a vent fitting in and a vent hose. So there was a piece of tape over it that did not last very long. Still over it, but it's not sealed. So we probably lost some fluid and maybe introduced some dirt and sand and stuff to that. So this will come apart, go through all the bearings, and make sure it is a clean bill of health for the beginning of the year as well. A couple other changes. That's really about it for the Carnage. Really did pretty well for only being put together in 7 days and never really tested until we got down there. As far as some changes, I think we're going to switch over to a methanol fuel. This will allow us to shed some weight. The car weighed in right around 3560 to 3570 every day. We need to get a couple hundred pounds out of the car to reach our goal of going 6s, I feel, without really leaning on the engine and powertrain. So we'll switch out to methanol. We get rid of the intercooler tank, all the lines, all the water in that. There's probably 8 or so gallons of water there. The intercooler itself, and then go to a lighter weight intake manifold also. With that being said, we'll be able to go to a shorter hood also, which will help navigate city streets and going up and down, around bends and stuff like that, not looking over top of the hood. Another change that we're looking at doing, I want to rewire the car again. I did just rewire it, but because it was in a hurry, I didn't do it exactly the way I wanted to. I'd actually like to reroute some of the wiring away from the passenger area and run it down the center of the car so that when the guys are getting in and out of the car, they're not stepping over wiring, less likely to rip out stuff. I would also like to put a different bulkhead style in the firewall for the connectors, as well as a couple other things. Some may not know this, but on the very first pass on Friday when we got down there, I made an 1/8 mile hit. Luckily the hood was off. I believe that was lucky. A fuel injector fell out of the fuel rail. I smelled the fuel and I seen the fuel splash all over the windshield, and then I smelled it very strong. I get to the end of the thing, to the end of the track, turned around. Luckily nothing caught on fire, and I think that's because the hood was off. It didn't hit the header, just a hot engine. As soon as I smelled it, I shut the fuel pump off, shut the ignition off, and just kind of coasted to the safety safari down there because I knew they had the fire extinguishers. If I stopped in the middle of the track, it would take them much longer to get to me. I figured the fastest way to them was just to get to them. When I got out of the car, I noticed my leg was wet with fuel. The inside of the car had fuel in it. Pride myself in safety. However, I feel like I missed something. The grommet that I had all the wires going through, the last bit of wires I ran through it, actually opened the grommet up and caused a 1-inch hole or so in the grommet between the wires, and I think that's where the fuel came because it's right behind the fuel rail that lost the injector. After fixing everything, I ended up taping that up the best I could with some Dynamat and other things just to try to seal everything I possibly could. But I'm going to pull the motor out. We're going to go through it anyways to regap the rings for the methanol and fix the oil leak and everything. So when that's out, I'll go over the whole firewall, make sure it's 100% sealed. With that being said, getting rid of the grommet that the wiring went through and actually putting in a bulkhead or a couple bulkhead connectors. We've done it on other cars. It was just never something I did on this car. But I see the need for it now. I plan on putting in a couple like cubby holes or cubby holders for wallets and snacks and stuff in the middle. We have cup holders, but we need more places to stash stuff on the drives instead of just letting it float all over the place. Cell phone holders for everybody would be nice. Make a couple changes there. We want to add an airbag to the rear suspension. Instead of changing out the coilovers every day. We pretty much wore out a set of bolts. We're changing them every day, twice a day. I want to put in a airbag above the rear end and sandwich between that and some framing, and then just take spare line with us, anything that we might need to replace it later on or on the road. I think that will save a tremendous amount of time. We usually had about a half hour just in that process when we got to a track, and we had to do all the rear end stuff first and then move to the front end and lower that. One big thing we're talking about changing is going to a trailer. for many reasons. One, it is just really hard on the car with the steering. I don't think it could make a full drag and drive safely with the steering linkages that I have, and changing them to a heavier situation. It might just be easier to ditch the roof rack, or to some extent maybe not put as much on it and have an enclosed trailer behind it. Curious what everybody else thinks about that. I know it makes the car cool, but at the end of the day it needs to be safe also, and easier to turn around. If we have everything in the trailer, it's easier to unload. We don't have to take the luggage rack off every day and just unhooking the trailer, taking the hitch out, and getting right down to it and turning the car around would be so much easier. The other things I want to do, just didn't have time. Once we got the rear end all fabricated and installed, again, we put this car together in 7 days. When we came up with the issue, we only had probably 4 days left before we were leaving for Florida. The driveline angle is not ideal, and it's primarily because of the engine and transmission angle. Because of the taller oil pan than what I used to have in the car, I actually raised the motor about a ½ inch, and it poses even more of a problem than what I had before, not being able to get the pinion angle correct, and not being able to get as much separation as I'd like. Right now I'm only about 3.5 inches of separation. If I can drop the engine down, the front of the engine down, or the back of the trans up, I'll be able to get 5 or 6 inches of separation, which, if anybody ever watches a radial car, that's how they get down the track. That's how they keep traction going all the way down the track, and just controlling that amount of downforce all the way through the track, or all the way down the track. So my plan is to do one of two things: either notch the oil pan, which we have to see how much room we have. This oil pan is made for a huge stroke, which I don't have. So I'm hoping I can notch it enough to lower it. If that doesn't work, I'm going to relocate the rack to in front of this bar, from behind to in front, and extend the knuckles out so that I can still get good steering. Put a new steering shaft in it, and kind of free up this spot. I do have a containment tray that I started making for the car before we left, but we were literally down to minutes before we left, and I didn't have enough time to finish it. Luckily, I bought a diaper just in case, so it got the diaper. We are going to go back to a containment tray. I feel that it is safer, more aerodynamic, and just easier to take on and off and check throughout the day of driving. We can easily just kind of glance in from up top and see if there's oil collected in it, versus waiting until it's just dripping. So that is one of the other changes we were going to make. So one of the other things that we noticed is the Pro Charger from the dyno to the track. We noticed a significant drop in boost, especially with the hood off. We put the hood on, we actually picked up a couple pounds of boost. I think we were down about 4 pounds of boost with the hood off. Then we dropped it to about 2 pounds of boost off from the dyno testing. We ended up, instead of drilling holes and not doing justice to the front end and not being able to do the finish work because we're just in the pits, we decided to speed the blower up. Ended up making about 24 pounds of boost, 24 and a half, I think, on the best day. I have this bell that I'd like to integrate into here, and I think we will cut something out and have this force air into the blower, and this will allow us to get our boost back. We're probably down 2 to 3 pounds of boost. Plus it'll allow colder air. It might even help on the street drive as well, as far as getting airflow into underneath the hood and cooling the engine bay down. Just ambient temperatures would be a lot better with the headers and the cylinder heads, valve covers, literally everything. Just be a lot happier, a lot cooler. So this will be another addition we plan on making to the car, and we're hopeful that it'll make a big difference in performance and for cooling. All right, so we're going to be changing the front doors to something lighter. Eric Kenward Racing he's the only one that I know of that makes doors for a station wagon, mainly because he has like the fastest Malibu wagon out there. So I actually met him on Monday. We're going to get a set of his front doors. They're still going to accept crank windows like we currently have, factory door latches. There will be lift off to make it easier to work on. The car is extremely hard to work on underneath the dash with such a small door. Also, getting out of the window in the trailer is very complicated. So going to fiberglass doors is going to make everything better. So it's going to be lighter weight, easier to remove, to get in and out of the trailer, easier to work on. It is just going to be better. Plus, we can get rid of the damage that Tom and then also Mother Nature with the rust created for us. The other thing we need to address is the fuel level gauge. Never really tested. It was installed a long time ago and never checked it. Anything under 5 to 5.5 gallons of fuel just showed 0. So we'd fill it up, it'd go to 70%, and we'd get to about 5 gallons and it would just show 0. So that last 5 gallons was just a guessing game of when we were going to run out of fuel. Especially if we had E85 still in it and we just dumped some 93 in it, it would use it so much faster because it's using 30% more. So it was a really big guessing game. We ended up stopping probably more often than we needed to. I also carried 5 gallons of fuel with me because of this. With the fuel system, because we're going to switch to methanol, we're going to actually try something that I haven't really seen before, but Rick and I feel that it's going to be possible. We're going to do not just dual injector, but also dual fuel rails. One set of injectors will be roughly a 80-pound injector, and that'll run 93 octane from the fuel cell in the back that we're going to use on the street, also driving through the pits, also into the burnout box, staging the car. We're going to have another fuel cell up front, 5 or 6 gallons. We're going to make a fuel cell for up front that'll be on an actual crank drive fuel pump, and that'll fuel the other set of injectors and fuel rail. That will turn on anytime we're under boost. So we're less likely to water down or thin out the oil by driving through the pits on methanol. And as soon as we hit boost in the burnout, it'll switch over to methanol. As soon as we're done with the burnout, it'll switch back to 93. As soon as we get on the trans brake, we'll instantly change over to methanol and run the car on methanol. So that's minimal amount of time on methanol. Therefore, it shouldn't wash out the cylinder walls. It shouldn't wash out the oil. We'll still check oil, still change oil often, but probably less often than a normal methanol car. Also safer because you're not just running on methanol all the time. So we're going to try that out. We're hoping that works. In theory, it should work out pretty well, but that'll be a pretty significant change this year or this coming year or the rest of the year. Another thing, we did change the brakes a couple days before we left to these TBMs. I cannot believe how well it stopped a 6,000-pound vehicle on the street. They do have some discoloration, but I know that's extremely normal. The pads look brand new, like the day I put them in. It also had several stops from 180 plus miles an hour. I think my fastest pass was 185, and never had an issue stop, never pulsated. Brake pedal feels amazing. Way better than any other situation I've ever had. So kudos to them. They have a phenomenal product. Very, very, very happy. Obviously, those are not going to go anywhere. Not going to service them. I don't think it needs anything. Nothing with that system anyways. So, yeah, I think that's about it.